This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. A royal crown, a deadly conspiracy, and a queen who was buried alive, but she returned only for her son. This is the story of Constance of Sicily, where fate placed her between the coffin and the crown. Step into our world, and stay with us until the very end. The court was silent. Only the whisper of silk skirts brushing marble floors echoed against the vaulted ceilings. A young queen, pale and trembling, walked slowly toward her fate. Every eye in the chamber followed her, some with pity, others with cold satisfaction. Her name was Constance of Sicily, a woman born into the most dangerous bloodline of medieval Europe, where crowns were not blessings, but curses. Constance had once been promised the world. She was the last heir of the Norman kings of Sicily, rulers who controlled a kingdom so rich, so strategically placed, that every empire, from the papacy to the Holy Roman Empire, coveted it. But Constance's life would become a slow descent into betrayal, whispers of witchcraft, and a burial so shocking it still lingers as one of history's darkest tales. The story began in Palermo, in the year 1154. Sicily was not merely an island, it was the jewel of the Mediterranean, a crossroads of cultures. Greek, Arab, Norman, and Latin influences collided in its streets, creating a society unlike any in Europe. Markets overflowed with spices from the east, merchants traded in silk and gold, and palaces shimmered with mosaics that seemed pulled from Byzantium itself. But behind this dazzling wealth lurked danger. Sicily's kings ruled a kingdom constantly under threat. The papacy in Rome viewed them as rivals. The Holy Roman Empire longed to seize their throne, and within Sicily itself, noble families schemed for influence. Into this unstable world, Constance was born. She was the daughter of Roger II, the great Norman king of Sicily. But fate played its cruel hand. Her father died when she was only 2, and she grew up in the shadows of court intrigue. Most queens of her age were married off by adolescence, but Constance remained unwed, cloistered in a convent well into her 30s. Rumors swirled. Was it a vow of chastity, or a political ploy to keep her from producing heirs who might challenge rival claimants? The truth was likely more sinister. The lords of Sicily feared her, because through Constance ran the last uncontested line of royal Norman blood, and that blood made her both powerful and expendable, but history would not let her remain hidden. By 1184, Sicily stood on the brink of crisis. The reigning king, William II, had no children, and in desperation, he betrothed Constance, his aunt, though she was nearly his age, to Henry VI, son of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. It was a union that stunned Christendom. The Sicilians hated the Germans, fearing their iron grip. But William's death was inevitable, and without Constance's marriage, Sicily might collapse into civil war. When William II died childless in 1189, the crown should have passed to Constance and her husband Henry. Instead, the Sicilian nobles crowned another man, Tancred of Lecce, an illegitimate cousin. Constance was furious, and so was Henry. For Henry, this was not merely an insult, it was an outrage to imperial honor. He marched into southern Italy, dragging Constance with him, determined to seize the Sicilian throne by force. But the campaign went horribly wrong. As Henry advanced, his forces crumbled under disease and rebellion. In 1191, Constance was left in Salerno with a small retinue while Henry retreated north. The citizens of Salerno, fearing retribution from Tancred, betrayed her. Imagine the scene: the Queen of Sicily, descendant of kings, suddenly surrounded by angry townspeople. She was seized, dragged through the streets, and handed over to Tancred's men. It was an almost unthinkable humiliation. Tancred, triumphant, paraded Constance like a trophy. She was imprisoned in Naples, her fate uncertain. And here began the darkest rumors. Some claimed that Tancred, desperate to remove Constance's claim forever, devised a punishment so cruel it would terrify her supporters. He ordered her placed in a coffin, nailed shut, and buried alive beneath the cold earth of southern Italy. But is this true? Chroniclers of the age wrote with horror about Constance's imprisonment. Some whispered that she had been shut in a tomb, though yet living. Others claimed the coffin was merely symbolic, a threat, not a final act. Still others insisted she was entombed for days, left to suffocate until she was half dead, then dragged out only when papal envoys intervened. What is certain is that her captivity shocked Europe. The Pope himself demanded her release, furious at the sacrilege of imprisoning a consecrated queen. Tancred, desperate to avoid excommunication, relented. Constance was freed in 1192 and returned to her husband, but the experience had changed her. The image of a queen, sealed in a coffin while still alive, burned itself into legend, whether literal or metaphorical. It symbolized her position, buried by betrayal, entombed by politics, gasping for air in a kingdom that sought her death. When Henry and Constance returned, they came with vengeance. By 1194, Tancred was dead, and Henry swept into Sicily with overwhelming force. Constance, now hardened, did not flinch. She entered Palermo not as a prisoner, but as a queen restored. And then, fate delivered a final twist. In December 1194, just days after Henry was crowned King of Sicily, Constance gave birth to a son in the small town of Jesi. The child was named Frederick. History would remember him as Frederick II, one of the most brilliant, ruthless, and enigmatic rulers of the Middle Ages, a man who would be called Stupor Mundi, the wonder of the world. But in that moment, he was just an infant, and his mother, Constance, swore to protect him at all costs. She had nearly been buried alive once. She would not allow her child's destiny to be buried as well. Yet, even at the height of her triumph, shadows loomed. Henry VI was ruthless, colder even than his father Barbarossa. He crushed rebellions without mercy, burning towns and hanging nobles. His cruelty alienated Sicilians, and though Constance was queen, she was often seen as his pawn. Then, in 1197, Henry died suddenly, fever, perhaps poison. Constance, widowed, seized her chance. For the first time in her life, she ruled Sicily alone. She was no longer the trembling woman dragged through the streets of Salerno. She was a queen who had stared into the coffin and returned alive. With a steady hand, she secured her son's future, ensuring that little Frederick would inherit both the Sicilian crown and the imperial legacy. But Constance would not live to see his greatness. She died in 1198, at the age of 44, leaving Frederick a 3-year-old king. And yet, her legend endured. Medieval storytellers never forgot the image of the queen buried alive. Some said she screamed in the coffin for 3 days, praying to God to spare her. Others claimed she emerged pale and ghost-like, forever haunted by her time in the grave. Was it truth or exaggeration? The answer lies somewhere between history and myth. Chroniclers used the imagery of burial to describe the suffocating helplessness of her captivity. But given the brutality of medieval punishment, it is not impossible that Constance truly felt the lid of a coffin close above her. What mattered was not the literal act, but what it symbolized. A queen betrayed by her people, a crown buried by ambition, and a woman who clawed her way back from the grave to give birth to one of the greatest emperors of all time. Constance of Sicily remains one of history's most haunting figures. Her life was a story of survival, of being sealed away, silenced, suffocated, yet somehow breaking free. She had walked to the edge of the tomb and returned, but the coffin never quite closed. Because as long as her son ruled, as long as Sicily's throne carried her blood, the world remembered the queen who was buried alive. Constance of Sicily, the queen who rose from the grave, crowned her son, and carved her name forever into history. Constance, the queen who was buried alive, yet whom the world could never bury. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and explore our Dark Series playlist.